Now we've had a look at the basics of using layers, I thought we'd have a look at a few ways that we can use them. In Layers Part 1 we had a quick look at adjustment layers. This first technique shows how to use what's called an adjustment layer mask to restrict the area of the image that's affected by the adjustment. This is much easier to see with an example than it is to explain. So, first of all, I've opened the image of a lily that we used in the selections tutorial. Next we'll add a hue and saturation adjustment layer using the icon at the bottom of the layers panel. It's the one that looks like the little half moon. Hue and saturation. I'm now going to move the saturation slider to the left so that all the colour disappears and we're left with a grayscale image. On the adjustment layer in the layers panel you'll see a white rectangle. This is the layer mask. When we apply black to the adjustment layer, we effectively punch a hole through the adjustment layer so we can see the original colour on the layer underneath. You can see the shape of the hole you've punched on the layer mask. So, if I select the brush tool and start painting with black on this petal, you can see the original colour revealed. I'll just do this piece so you can see how it works. So I'm painting with black, and you can see the result on the layer mask. Oops. Now I've inadvertently included part of the background flower. So if I now switch to using white instead of black, in other words I make the foreground colour white, then I can repair the hole that I've just made. So if I use black, I make the hole bigger. If I use white, I repair the hole. The usual aide-memoire is black conceals, white reveals. In other words, the black areas of the layer mask hide the effect of the adjustment, but white areas reveal the effect. You can apply the black on the adjustment layer with whatever tool you wish to use. For instance, we know from the selections tutorial that we can use the quick selection tool to select just the main lily head. I'm just going to magically pause the tutorial here while I make the selection. There you go, speedy or what? We can now fill the selection using Alt and Backspace to fill the selection with the foreground colour, which is currently black. There is now a lily-shaped mask. You may have seen advertising illustrations where you perhaps have a grayscale image with just a red car in colour. This is how you can achieve that sort of an effect. There are several advantages to using an adjustment layer, one of which is the ability to use a mask to restrict the area affected. Another is that you can go back and change the adjustment itself. If the adjustments panel is still open, then you simply make the adjustment layer active and the sliders for the adjustments become active as well. If you can't see the adjustments panel, double-click on the cogwheel symbol on the adjustment layer and you will see the sliders again. I'm going to move the saturation slider back to the centre so that all the colours reappear. I'm then going to drag the hue slider until I get a colour I like. Oh, yuck. Not all adjustments are good adjustments. Or at least that shows the effect. The mask hasn't changed, so the colour adjustment still only applies to the white areas of the mask. One thing to remember is that an adjustment layer is just that, a layer. So it has its own opacity setting. If I reduce the opacity, then the effect of the adjustment is reduced. Which makes it a little less violent. The next thing I want to look at is a clipping mask. This lets you cut an image out in the shape of another one. We're going to start with cutting out in the shape of some text. So I'm going to open an image with some general pattern. What have we got? Yep, that'll do fine. And I'm going to add some text in a nice fat font. I have the text tool selected and I'm going to use the stencil font. I need big text, so we'll try 72 point. And I'm going to make it red so you can see it a bit better, but the colour really doesn't matter. That's nothing like big enough, so we'll select the text and we'll make it, let's try 150. No, that's still not really big enough, so let's go up to 200. Yeah, that's fine. The text is centred, so all I've got to do is drag it into the middle of the image and click on the tick. I need to be able to move the text layer below the image, so I need to unlock the background layer. So I double click, I'm going to give it the name Image and click OK. I can now drag the fat text layer underneath the image. Now, making sure that the image layer is active, if I hold the Alt key down, I can move my cursor up to the line that divides the two layers until we get this double circle symbol. And then I release the mouse. You could use the Create Clipping Mask option from the Layers menu to do the same thing. As you can see, we now have the image cut out in the shape of the text. You'll notice that the background is shown as the checkerboard, meaning that it is transparent. So you could add another layer at the bottom of the stack and add another image or some other background. I'm going to pick two colours from the image and create a gradient. So first of all, make my new layer, drag it down to the bottom. I'm going to select a foreground colour. What should we have? Yeah, that'll do. And a background colour, maybe a pale green. And then I'm going to select the gradient tool and drag from the top of the image down to the bottom. I could then add a texture from the filters menu, change the opacity and so on. The shape you use doesn't have to be text. I'm going to unclip the image from the text layer by again holding the Alt key down and moving the mouse until I get the double circle symbol and releasing the mouse. Next, I'm going to delete the text layer and I'm going to switch off the gradient. Now I'm going to create a new blank layer beneath the image, and I'm going to use a brush to make a more spread out shape. We'll look at brushes properly later on, but for now I'm going to select the leaf brush and I'm going to make some marks on the new layer. I want a fairly big size, so I'm going to use, let's try 300. Now, in order to see what I'm doing on the new layer, I need to temporarily switch the image off. Now, again, the colour doesn't matter. I'm not a particularly fan of pink, but it'll do for the purpose. So, just add some nice random shapes. Okay, now I'll switch the image back on. I'll hold the Alt key down until I get my double circle symbol, and there we have the image cut out into the shape of the leaves. Finally, for this tutorial, we're going to use layers to create a simple repeating pattern. I'm going to use a scanned image of a peacock feather, which I've cropped tightly so that there's no blank space around the edges. As this is a demo, I've changed the size of the image to 200 pixels wide. Naturally, if you were doing this for a real project, then you would select a suitable size for the purpose. Picking a small size here will just speed up the processing needed for each manipulation. Now, we need to make space for the repeats to fit in. To do this, we need to increase the canvas size. I find it easiest to explain this idea to textile people. If you think of a piece of fabric with motifs appliqued onto it, then in elements terms, the fabric is the canvas and the motifs are the repeated images. So, if we want to add more motifs, then we need to increase the canvas size to make room for them. To do this, we go to Image, Resize, Canvas Size. As you can see here, the shortcut is Alt, Control and C. I want to have 5 feathers across the top row of my pattern, so I'm going to change the units to percent and type in 400. I also need to specify where the extra canvas is to go. If you don't change the setting, then the new canvas will be spread evenly all round the image. I want all the new stuff to be on the right hand side, so I need to click on the left arrow of the anchor. The arrows now point to the right hand side. It's quite useful to have the canvas extension colour set to something that contrasts well against the image. That way, if you have any gaps between your layers, you'll see them more easily. Now we just click on OK. Next, I'm going to select the original image using the rectangular marquee tool and copy it. So now we have the marching ants. Control and C to copy. And now I'm going to paste it using Control and V. At the moment it doesn't look as though anything's happened, but if you look at the Layers panel, you can see the new layer created when I pasted the image. I can now drag it into place by holding the Control key down and dragging with the mouse. Get it lined up nicely. I now want to rotate the image I've just pasted so that it's facing the other way. To do this, I go to Image, Rotate and select Flip Layer Horizontal. If you remember from the basic manipulations tutorial, the first box in the Rotate option deals with the whole image. The second box deals with the active layer, so I can flip the whole image or just the selected layer. Yeah, that looks pretty. The image that I copied is still on the clipboard, so I don't have to copy it again. I can simply paste it a second time. Control and V. Hold the Control key down and pull it into place. Then I can do the same thing again, Control and V. Hold the Control key down, pull it into place. And this time I need to flip that layer again to keep the pattern going. So Image, Rotate, Flip Layer Horizontal. I've just realised that when I increased the canvas size, I should have put 500% in, not 400%, because I actually want 5 feathers on my pattern. So I'll go back up to Image, Resize, Canvas Size, change it to percent again, and make it 125%. I think that should be right. I'm not very good with numbers. Again, I want it to be on the right hand side. Yep, that should be fine. And we have our space for the fifth feather. Now the image is still on the clipboard because we haven't copied anything else in the meantime, so I can just do Control and V to get the remaining copy of the image. Pull it into place with the mouse, and we're good to go. Next, I want to repeat the 5 feathers in a row underneath where they are now. To do this, I need to flatten the image. This means combining all the current layers into one so it can be copied as a block. I'll deal with some of the variations of image flattening in a later tutorial. For now, I'll go to the Layer menu and select Flatten Image. You can see in the Layer panel what's happened. Next, I need to increase the canvas size again, so back to Image Resize Canvas Size. This time I'll increase the height by 200% and specify that I want the new canvas at the bottom this time. So height by 200. I need to click on the top arrow so that the new canvas will appear below the current image, and click on OK. Next, I use the Marquee tool again to select the top part of the image. I'm going to copy it with Ctrl and C and paste it with Ctrl and V. Now, holding the Control key down, I drag the new layer to the bottom. Finally, I need to rotate the new layer by going to Image Rotate and selecting Flip Layer Vertical. You may need to just tidy up the positioning of the layers so everything is aligned properly, and you may want to just crop the outer edges just so everything's tidy. But that is basically one way to do a repeating pattern.